in design projects. Probably we will take one more minute to see if more people join in, and please let me know in the chat if you can hear me, if the sound is okay, if the picture is okay. Okay, great. I have this information. So thanks again for joining me today. And that will be a short story, short information, totally based on my experience. And traditionally, as all the webinars, I want to start with the introduction of myself, but it will not be as short as the whole webinar, because I will go back to it every once in a while just to, highlight some facts and how we came to this or that conclusion. So my name is Andrew, and I'm Approval Studio project manager. I started to work in this sphere 7 years ago when I was offered the position of client support specialist in Eastman Kodak Company. Back then, I was sure that Kodak Company is working with cameras and stuff, so basically everything for the photography. As it turned out, this company had their own division that was working with workflows, workflow automation, and they were a major producer of this software, and they provided it to the major companies throughout of the world. Basically, I cannot name the companies they were working with, but you know all those companies because you use their products every day. Whenever you you take a look around of you, you will definitely see something from from things that those companies are producing. So when I joined Eastman Kodak Company, I was shown this artwork tool, and it turned out that they had a great scheme of how the product flow should build. Every company, every client of theirs had their own workflow that had numerous pages, hundreds and hundreds of steps, and only few of those steps were working in the design sphere. Everything else was about the production. So basically, when we're talking about the company of that size, they were working with goods production, pharmaceutical companies, all kind of stuff, as I said. And every company needed the workflow of their own. And my job was to make sure that all those workflows are working fine. And I had to dive in every of those workflows and basically learn it by heart. So that was the moment when I found out what the workflow was and how the big companies are working with their product production and with their designs as well. Later on in 2017, this division of Kodak Company was sold, and that was the moment when we decided to create something similar, not so big, but for the companies smaller, for SMBs, basically small and medium businesses, companies that still want to use the same solution but cannot afford themselves to pay money for such product as Kodak had. So that's how we created Approval Studio. And since then, I started to work with smaller companies and started to communicate a lot with my clients to know what they really need and how to improve my software. So among our clients, we have marketing agencies, we have design agencies, we have all types of designers, basically, in our hosts. Basically, we have also production companies and so on and so on. So, and all those companies, they have different needs, and I try every day, to deep dive in their needs and to figure out how we can improve their workflows. So I outlined several of the problems that most of them are facing, and we'll talk about them today. So the first problem is that as many companies as I speak with, all of them have this problem with building the right workflow. The project take a really long time because of the processes that are not associated with the creativity. And this is one of the biggest problems. Actually, last year I spoke with a great guy designer. He's currently working in the university in the USA, but for years he's been working with such companies as SMG and Sony Production. He created different covers for CD for world-known bands and for movies such as Kill Bill. That was actually one of his jobs. And my question was, how long would it take for him to create something? And how long it would take the whole process of communicating with the client. And it turned out that the whole process of communication takes like 80% of all the project lengths, and only 20% is for the creativity itself. So his problem was that he needed to cut down this project length in terms of communication. And that was one of the things we spoke about. So he said that there were a project with huge companies that he should have refused from because they were taking too long time, and he was just losing money, even despite they had huge amount of money paying him for that. So the first problem that you have is long projects, and consequently, the less money you can earn per month, and consequently, your profit is decreased. So it seems simple when you're working as a freelancer, as a designer with a company of yours. For example, here's this simple workflow: designer, client, and decision. So designer creates an artwork, sends it to the client, and client needs to make a decision. It looks really simple, but even here you can make different adjustments because these decisions can go one by one, and you can have like multiple rounds, multiple cycles, multiple iterations, and the project turns into something really just a headache, let's say, just a headache. But if we're talking about simple workflow, when you are a big agency, you have a different workflow that brings more headache to you. For example, here is another workflow that probably you faced with. So you have a project manager who is working with the team, like legal, marketing, whatever your team is, people generating the idea, people given the task. They get the ideas and send it to the designer. Designer creates the artwork and sends them for the decision. If legal and marketing team approve that, they are able to send it to the client. But if there are some problems, some mistakes, they create another cycle and so on. So until the product is approved by the internal team, it will not go to the client. The client itself usually also won't be just one person who takes the decision. You have multiple stakeholders, and here this is the situation when, again, you get a lot of feedbacks, a lot of them go from different channels, and you just getting lost. And again, it's just a headache, a nightmare of those back and forth emailing where you try to figure out everything that they say. So this workflow can also be optimized. First of all, what are the solutions in these two problems? I mean, even the first one, the small, simple workflow, and the headache workflow. So first of all, you need to cut down the number of people who participate in the approval process. You need to cut down the number of stakeholders. There are situations when people come to you and say, you know, I talked to my kid, wife, whoever it is, and they say they did not like it. Well, if they're not target audience, you should not listen to them. This goes for your internal team. For the client, you also should decide who will be one or maximum two people who will create and send the task for you. Basically, if you have change request and it goes from 5-10 people, especially if you are not using any tools like Approval Studio, any approval tools, that will be just the mess of emails where you will eventually get lost, and some of the feedbacks will be lost, and you will have to redo the work again. Consequently, it will increase the time you spend with the workflow, and consequently, you will lose money on it. So the first idea here is to drop those extra stakeholders, those people who are not necessarily should be in the project. The second thing, just have one or two communication points, one or two responsible people who will gather all the information and give it to you. So minimize your communication. And the third option clearly is to use some modern tools, some softwares such as approval tools, basically review tools, approval tools, and so on. We will talk about them later. So the first thing what you need to do is to optimize your workflow. Let's go to the second problem. So Designish, English, and Marketish. A very interesting problem, and I'm not talking specifically about language, but even when we speak one in the same English language, one and the same meaning for me, one and the same word for me will not mean the same thing for you. It will happen probably in 80%, but those 20% left, they will bring a headache again into our communication. Uh, first of all, don't forget that working in one sphere brings your vocabulary to another level and it adjusts it. I played a bit, did my research and found a few words like from design vocabulary and found there are quite a few things probably you all know, like big data. For me, as an IT guy, big data is one thing, but for a designer, it turned out it's just a number of tables, charts, and database that may be very large, very small, but is dependently very impressive. So the whole idea in here is the impression. That's totally different from what like IT team means. The same goes for SMIC. Uh, you all know what is this, but they have another abbreviation, can match your colors, and that's true. So lots of things in here, but talking about this communication, you should stick to one thing. Always talk to your customer as they are your children. You might think that some things, some words that you say are totally obvious, but it turned out that they might be obvious for you, but not for your uh, customer. So whenever you say that the project is in progress, like I have in this case, you might mean that the project you're working on, but they can understand that they really that you did not really start to work on it. So that's the simple thing. And I hear a lot when I talk to my customers that they refer very often that, oh, this customer is dumb. Not really. The thing is that this customer just does not have all those knowledge that you have. And basically, if he would have those, if he was as smart as you, as he was as professional in this sphere as you, he would not come to you and would not bring you money for your help. So it's not about being patient, but it's about understand that you need to build this bridge since you are the professional and these people come to you. You need to build this communication bridge and make sure that every word you say is understood by your customer. So try to explain everything. The same goes actually when you present your design or defend your design. You need to explain your every decision because there are cases when people just don't like some colors and so on and so on. And you need to make sure that your client understands why this or that color was used. For example, the client doesn't have the brand book, but you use the colors that should really fit this sphere he's working in. You should explain why this or that color match. So you might change his viewpoint on that. This is another thing. So make sure that you are on one and the same page with your customer. Pretty simple. Another thing that currently is very like modern is a global village term that was originally from 1962, I guess. Global village. What it means, especially in design sphere, that modern technologies, they just shrink in the world. And 100 years ago, to communicate with somebody from Canada or USA, and when you're in Europe, you had to spend like thousands of dollars and like months, if not years, to get from one place to another, or use a telephone where again it would be expensive and still you need to go from one place to another. Right now with all those internets, modern technologies, I can be on the beach somewhere and speak with somebody in the office without any problems. And what it gives to the design sphere, it enlarges your market. Basically, if previously you were limited to your city or to your country, right now you can work with anyone in this world who also has internet. You have all the tools and all the needs for you. But that also brings the responsibilities. Because working with people from other countries, you should either know their mentality quite well, or you should do quite a lot of research, because you don't know, first of all, the expectations that those people have. You probably know that some countries, some people, they are very devoted to their jobs and they're ready to spend like 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day to make the job done. Some other countries, for example, in Europe, they know that in the middle of the day, especially in summer, they need to take 1 or 2 hour break, to have some rest. And that's okay. But working with those people, you should know what to expect from them and what they should expect from you. So before you start working with them, try to agree on some terms like this. Also, another thing is different mentality. So working for some other country, you should be very careful in terms of culture, because meaning, different words again, and we're going back to this, different words have different meanings, and even different notions mean different meanings in different countries. For example, the Pampers company, the diapers, they used to have this stork drawn on the boxes and on the advertising all over the world. And when they launched in Japan, they launched their marketing campaign. They drew the same thing: stroke, bringing the child. And those they spent lots of money, and the campaign just failed. The reason for that was discovered later on. It turned out that uh, in Japan, those people don't have this fairy tale, those myth that strokes bring kids to humans. So that's why they could not associate the diaper and the stroke. So the company failed, and they, as I said, they spent lots of money on it. Coca-Cola company did the same thing. They just went with the original name to the market, and I wrote it to myself. And it turned out that in some dialects, Coca-Cola was translated as "buy the vax, Deadpool." So again, something that no one would buy because just a stupid name. Another example of Pepsi, again, wrote it down. So Pepsi had this logo: Pepsi brings you back to life. And it turned out that in China, it was Pepsi brings your ancestor back from grave. So again, something that people would not want to buy just because the translation is poor and just because the marketers did not do their job. So again, be very attentive and patient while working with people from other country. But that sounds like working with people from other countries bad, inconvenient, and so on and so on. That's not true. Again, different prices on different markets, and for the same job as you do in your country, you can get like more income in another country. And sometimes these differences, they do the good job for you. First of all, because you might not know some things, your idea might just burst out and you can create something great, something huge for this market. The second thing, there is such thing as different time zones, and you should use this as an advantage. Lots of people consider that different time zones is disadvantage for business. Again, while working with Kodak, we created the workflow that when one team, European team, was ending the job, the next team was starting their job. And there were few hours that those teams met during the meetings. They could discuss. They had 24 hours nonstop workflow. So they keep on working 24 hours, and that significantly increased the performance. You can do the same thing. While your client is sleeping, you're working, but in the morning, you can communicate with the client, get the feedback. Even with different time zone, again, we're going back to the situation when in different time zone, you can still use this as an advantage with the help of different review tools. You both can sleep, but the work will be done for you with the help of different software. Uh, Again, you wake up and you get feedback from your client who woke up a few hours earlier. So by the mid of the day, you can get the new information from the client and keep on working. Again, you can shrink the time that this project takes. Okay, so the last part probably that I want to talk about is bien sûr software. So as an IT guy, I know that lots of my clients and myself, we are using different kind of software that can make our life easier. Starting with Adobe Cloud, where you can now create all your artworks, all kind of projects, and that's really wonderful because years ago, Adobe was affordable only to big companies because they had like enormous price for their products. Right now, they have those subscriptions starting from $29 per month that everyone can afford. So now you can use all those tools for them just for this amount of money, basically like paying a cell phone bill. The same goes for such tools as Zoom that I'm using to communicate with you right now, or Teams. Basically, communication tools that allow you to talk to anyone from this world. Also, another thing that you would consider to use all kind of cloud solutions like Dropbox, OneDrive, and so on. There are dozens on the market, and all of them allow you to store all this information and transfer from one client to another client, of course. And I mentioned a few times during my monologue that you can also use different approval tools, review tools that allow you to speed up your communication with the client and allow to make the communication more transparent. Basically, with the help of those, you can optimize your workflows and cut down the expenses. So among them, as I mentioned, is our review tool, our approval studio that was created to make this communication transparent, to easily get the feedback from your clients on your artworks from one people to 10 people. So it reduces the problem when you have dozens of stakeholders on the plate because everything is in one place. And of course, don't forget about tools, different kind of CRMs such as Pipedrive and so on, where you can store all the information about your clients, all the database, all the communications again. So these are all my brief hints. Let me know if you have any questions right now. I will be happy to answer those. Okay, looks like something happened to my microphone. Uh, Looks like we don't have any questions, so thank you for your time, for your attention, and I hope to see you on eSputnik and on Approval Studio. Good luck.